Coming up, what could be better than a buzzer beater by Brooklyn? We talk about Nic Claxton, the closing sequences as the Nets hand the Philadelphia 76ers a last-second loss on their home court. We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marmbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets. Bet if your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com right now. And Doug, when we talk about 105-103 victory for the Brooklyn Nets, and it all comes what almost felt like the right way to have this win. Nic Claxton on an offensive rebound, put-back buzzer beater, the first of his career at any level. How did that feel on a Monday morning?
Team of destiny, baby. I mean, absolute team of destiny. Like, this is, how else do we even phrase it at this point? I'm constantly flummoxed. I made the decision a few games ago to say, we're just rooting for wins here on out. I'm over we're over the draft position. We're over the Cooper Flag stuff. It's over. It's long past. At this point, let's life is short. We're hurtling through the universe, on a flammable lifeboat here. Like we just gotta at some point just dial into the wins. And this one was awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. No sarcasm, nothing about it. We're bought in on just whatever the team's going to do. They're going to do. If they're just going to win games, if they're going to beat Joel Embiid, PG, and Tyrese Maxey on a buzzer beater from Nic Claxton, then just so be it. That's just what we're going to do. And it's just one of these situations where we're going to go through the whole game, but just on a high level. I mean, I'm not kidding. Team of destiny. Jordan Fernandez should be the coach that he won't be because they don't have enough wins. But this is unbelievable. Unbelievable what they're doing. This team. They got no point guard. D'Lo didn't even play. What are you going to do? How can they tank? If they're going to win these games? This is what tanking looks like. Tanking looks like having mostly just kind of NBA retreads on your team. That's what tanking teams do. They also just usually lose. The Nets don't lose. I don't get it.
The Brooklyn Nets don't have enough wins for Jordan Fernandez to be coach of the year yet. I think it's probably where you wanted to finish that sentence. Listen, no, it is, man. That the closing sequences, which by the way, we'll go through all of it. It comes off of Keon Johnson hits a really big three. The possession before you come down, it's Trendon Watford, who by the way claps his hands when Keon has the ball. He gives him the clap and says put it in my hands right now. Let me set this up, and he does. Dribbles, penetrates just inside the arc, kicks it over to Keon. He fires the three, one that he had just made from nearly the same spot. It doesn't go down. And there's just something, as you say, team of destiny is such a phrase to use around a roster that's so far under 500 right now. But there's something that just feels like, well, of course, you're going to have Nic Claxton on the weak side of the basket with nobody on him. So when this ball, of course, bounces off backboard and caroms to the left, he's just there to catch that beautiful little baby bird and put him right back in the nest. It really was such a perfect moment. And you see when you're on the road in Philadelphia and the entire team just goes and swarms Claxton off in the corner from the basket there. It was a great call by Ian Eagle, as it always is. Great call by Chris Carino, actually on the radio. He did an awesome job with Capstraw there. It is a lot easier, man, and a lot more fun to just sit back and enjoy these games and root for the win. And there's nothing better than seeing Nic Claxton, who's really struggled early in the season, who had 5 blocks in this game. We'll talk about, right? It's great to see some of the guys that when you stop thinking about the tank and thinking about what should have been,
correct,
then you just get super excited for all these players and what they're doing on a night in, night out basis, getting this win 105-103.
When you root for sports the way you're supposed to root for sports, this is like an awesome Nets win.
Yes.
If you're rooting for sports perfectly, if the NBA didn't screw this up by just incentivizing all the wrong things and the teams being bought into it and whatever, we've long said the Nets should tank because getting Cooper Flag is or guys like this is important. So I'm just not going to go through that again. But if you just root for sports the way we've grown up rooting for sports, this is an awesome win. It's awesome. They are completely undermanned. They have a team. I mean, Philly's a dumpster fire, but in theory, they're full strength for this game with Embiid, PG, Maxey, right? They have all the guys. This team has no D'Lo, has nobody else. It's they're starting Killian Hayes, who just was in the G League 10 seconds ago, right? And they're starting Killian Hayes. Trendon Watford's effectively the backup point guard. I mean, is the backup point guard. Like, this shouldn't happen. And so if you just take that, if you strip away the idiocy of the system that just incentivizes all the wrong things from, a third of the teams in the league, you strip that away, then you have a buzzer beater on the road in Philly, not a rivalry, but there's not been the best blood between these teams. There's some history here, right? Claxton plus Embiid has been a thing in the past, right? Like, you got the Philly crowd, you got all these things. I mean, it just lines itself up completely perfectly. And I'm actually glad, just, hate to make things about myself, but just this once, right? We'll do it
for one time. Take a little bit of space for yourself.
Just this once, I'll make it about myself. I'm so glad I changed like my rooting tactic, like coming out of the All-Star break, basically, which was, I'm just not going to complain anymore about the draft pick. Like, that's it. Personal edict. And this was just in time to do it because it just made it such a cool experience. 0.2 on the clock when Claxton gets that ball and puts it back in, and it just kind of hovers around. And also, last thing, if you see the bench reaction, it's awesome because they all see Keon's thing float out, and they're like, by the way, this game goes to OT, Nets definitely lose. They definitely would have lost this game in OT. Like, the way this was trending, it was just, I don't think they could have held on in OT. You see the whole Nets bench react, disappointed, and then just go right back into being so because it's like looks like it's going to happen.
There's also a great sequence where they showed, I think actually the Brooklyn Nets posted this on over on X, where like the focus is on Trendon Watford, and it really is showing the bench to what you're talking about. But Trendon Watford, because he dishes that ball to Keon Johnson on the wing, like he's all you can see is his eyes tracking the ball through the sequence, and then when it goes in from Claxton, it's just the elation, and then he starts the full sprint to that corner. It's awesome, man. And to your point, like we're not bringing up the other things, and I think you and I think everyone would agree that follows this podcast in any form or fashion. I always have a hard time not like rooting for basketball, like not rooting for wins, right? Like even when we've been on board with what the agenda should be, I've always had that little, and if maybe though something else works out, it's the optimism around it. And that's in the face of like harsh realities of what you want to do and what the NBA has conditioned teams to do when you're of a certain ilk. But every time that you do this, 7 of 9 now, the Brooklyn Nets have won. At a certain point, and this is egg on my face too, because I sat here and said, sure, they've won 4 of, I think, 5 at that point. And I go, but what are we really going to be talking about in 3, 4, 5 more games? Like, I didn't think it was going to be possible, but here we are. So at a certain point, like, it doesn't matter who they played or what the schedule was or injuries or anything else. You went out and played the Philadelphia 76ers, who are by record a terrible team, but by talent supposed to be really good. And you got an awesome win on the road, 105-103. Coming up here in a second, though, we're going to talk about Nic Claxton's full stat line out of this game, what he was doing on the defensive end, Trendon Watford, and how he just kind of really does take over a game in critical ways that they need, plus what we've seen from some of the other key contributors along the way. That's all coming up here in just one beautiful moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They're going to swoosh. They're going to save thanks to Dash Pass every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game. You score a huge deal the next day. Super simple. When any player in the NBA scores 50 or more in a game during the season, 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. That's 12 for 12 to all you math majors. Here's a few things you can get in this deal. You can get a game day feast, epic 50-point performance. It's going to celebrate those wings, pizza, burgers from your favorite spot. Get the late night cravings. Look at that. It said this goes till midnight. We get lunch on the go, quick and easy lunch the next day. You're just rooting for those 50 points from any player across the league. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off and order the next day up to $10 off. Use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game. Uneligible orders at participating merchants must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, winners 105-103 buzzer beater for the Nets, Nic Claxton, as I said in the post game, goes, that's my first game winner I've had ever. So, I mean, like, that was a moment for him going all the way back to every single form of fashion, which, by the way, when he was a younger player, he did play point guard before he sprouted up and became this long, lean player that we know today. So there probably were some opportunities. Like, Nic Claxton probably could reflect back on some missed chances throughout the course of his non-professional career, I should say. But this is also a game where the Nets, from an offensive standpoint, they put up 105 points in this game. So they clear 100. That's impressive. Now, they did put up 40 in the first quarter.
I mean, not for the modern NBA, it's not, but yeah, keep going.
Sorry, let me clarify that. It's impressive for Brooklyn because they had a hard time getting over 100 points. It was also massively impressive that they put up 40 points in the first quarter. Does it take away a little bit of the steam that they only got 65 over the next 3? Sure. But the bottom line is like to be able to put up something early in this game to kind of, because one of the things I think we've talked about with this team and the battle and maybe looking at the Cleveland game, which they were in all the way through and then they fade in the third quarter. But there's something about, I think, sending a message early on that, hey, like we can put up a volume of points here. We can knock down some of our open looks if we're going to have those opportunities. That was impressive to me from a team standpoint based on what their roster has been, what the recent track record has been. We can talk about the full game, but like I did not have 40-point first quarter on my bingo card for the Brooklyn Nets when we talk about where this team is offensively by the way, across their 7 out of 9 game winning streak.
Yeah, and like we saw probably the real version of the offense over the next 3 quarters, right?
Yeah.
I think that's more representative, sort of, and definitely into the fourth quarter because it just bogs that all the way down in the fourth. So getting out into the lead early, but this is again, we've seen this a lot with the Nets. These teams, like I said the last couple of times ago, like they play with their food too long against this team because they look across the court, they see who they're up against. Mm-hmm. They see they're going to be, like 9.5, 10-point favorites or whatever. I think the 11.5-point favorites, like the Sixers were going to this game. I mean, that's like meaningful. And they know, like the players know this. And then and I think there's like not this sense of urgency against this team. And the problem with the Nets is if you do not have a sense of urgency, they do. The Nets have a sense of urgency, and these guys are all the way dialed in. They run a motion offense, which is super annoying for other teams to probably just defend because it's like you're not just defending one guy and trying to take one thing away. Like there is constant movement. The defense is just picking you up 3/4 court at least, almost all the way. Every time Zaire Williams is in the game, like he's picking up opposing ball handlers like way early. The stats on this are way up about where these guys are getting picked up. It makes it really hard to get into your offense, or just makes it annoying. It just makes it annoying. Like they're just annoying. Yeah, they're an annoying team to play.
I gotta keep tracking. I gotta keep following this guy. And by the way, I mean it's no disrespect to the Brooklyn Nets players. We like watching them. If you're the Philly players, you go, I gotta follow this guy around. What are the chances Keon Johnson's really gonna knock down a shot? Whoops! Second to last possession offensively for the Nets. He does knock down that shot. And by the way, it was pretty open, right? Because you just don't feel like you should have to put in the real effort against the players you look across at.
Yeah. They're running rescreening actions. They're having guys like strong and weak side corner shooters that are just kind of always there. These guys also come up off pin downs, like if you're not paying attention, and they're just going to try to get threes that way. And then you do all this, and the Sixers you still hold them to 25% from 3, and you still lose to the Nets.
Well, that's the other part of it, right? Like
the Nets were horrible.
They didn't light the world on fire here to get the win. Like they said 25%.
Exactly. Like, Cam Johnson was 1 for 9 from 3. Like the starters can't really hit threes. It's just this whole thing where it just doesn't really make any sense. And I think that these teams come into play this team. They look across the court and they're like Killian Hayes, Keon Johnson. Like we're Joel Embiid. We're Paul George. Like, what are we going to do here? We're going to lose. And then these guys just play so hard. And it's almost like they just kind of trick you. Like it just, I don't even know a way to put it. It's like
an optical illusion.
They're gaslighting you. They're just gaslighting you a little bit about what's happening because all of a sudden you're like, now I was like, well, now we're shooting 25% from 3 because that's what the Sixers did too, right? And Embiid looked kind of cooked. Like there's other things in this game too. Like Embiid looked like he did not want to be out there. Plus, Slash might be hurt. Like he just looked he looked horrible. PG has looked bad all season. So maybe the Sixers team's clearly overrated too, and even that doesn't fully account for everything that's happening in here. But playing against the Nets, you just can't come out slow. They try too hard. And in the modern NBA, the talent is flattened enough. It's not flattened all the way when you get to championship level stuff because you need to have the best players. Across the rest of the league, it is flattened enough that effort actually does pay. Like if you everyone else has enough effort. If you have a requisite effort at 15 to 20% more early in the game, that's just going to count for a lot because the talent level is just good enough. We see it later when the Sixers dial up their effort. Again, Nets probably would lose. This goes an extra 5 minutes. I think the Nets lose, but they just the Sixers just kind of, it was too little too late. And, and then you get the Claxton buzzer beater.
And you don't get to play an extra 5 minutes when you lose on a Nic Claxton buzzer beater. That's the way the NBA works. So the Nets win this one outright in regulation. And to your point, by the way, so there's a couple of things here. When you look over and you see the 5-man starting lineup for Philadelphia, and you see everybody's in double digits, led by Tyrese Maxey, 31 points. Now, there's a couple of things here, and I do always want to make sure to point out, when you look across the court and you say, well, it's, the Nets look at this roster, the one thing you probably don't account for is their defensive effort. Like, even though we're talking about it and how that's looked over the last 10, 15 games, other teams don't think about it that way. Offensive players don't think about it that way because it's an offensive game in the NBA. We'll go out, we'll get our points. Yeah, sure, they've played well, but not against us, not against me. And then you turn around and you combine that with Paul George being 1 of 6. You mentioned Joel Embiid, probably hurt, but 0 of 6 for him from beyond the arc as well. You put in Kelly Oubre, 0 of 3. And then the big factor here when you talk about it, we'll get into Trendon Watford a bit more now, is when you look at the bench. Well, I look over and I see a total of 13 points from the Philadelphia bench, and they only have one player that plays significant minutes there, 23. But the Brooklyn Nets are a team, because of how they're constructed, they're going to go deeper. They're going to have guys that come in and play significant minutes, like Trendon Watford gives you double digits, like Day'Ron Sharpe, who only in 13 minutes gives you another double-digit performance. Even Jalen Wilson coming in off the bench here struggled a bit as he has of late. Low shot volume, but impactful. Takes 3 3-pointers, makes 2 of them, gets to the line a couple times as well. So it's a full team effort. Like, beyond the percentages, it's the idea that when you think about who's coming in for the Brooklyn Nets, not about expectations or what their profile is in the NBA, but just that they're used to doing this. They come in and their points and their role, it matters to the Brooklyn Nets having success. Whereas if you're most typical teams, especially good ones, and Philadelphia is not a good team. Like, let's just be clear. Take the names off the jerseys. The Brooklyn Nets have played a better brand of basketball probably this season than Philadelphia. But these guys know what their roles are and step up in big spots here. So Trendon Watford, to me, when we talk about his 24 minutes, 7 of 13, gets to the line a few times and gives you 16 points to go along with his 6 assists. Like, he's taken over. Do you know D'Angelo Russell? Trendon Watford steps up. It's not perfect all the time, but he can certainly attack downhill at the basket and knows when to make the passes to open shooters around this team. Well, we should probably take a break here and get into the other side. You think? As I noticed the clock running down on me here, buzzer beater for Adam. Should we go segment 3 to talk about Trendon Watford?
Yeah. We got to talk about. We probably waited too long to talk about Watford. Frankly, there's just on a high level where I think we're still, and you can kind of see this from us too. It's like, breaking down the games. Yeah. It's just like this doesn't have the same feel. Like, we've been doing this for years and years, right? Like, we know there's usually a certain cadence around these games because you kind of want to sort of tell a story throughout, and we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to the break here in a sec, but usually what we've tried to do is tell a story about the game, right? From a sort of finish the game and then kind of backtrack to sort of how you got there. But the Nets have added this new layer of story piece in there, which is it just none of it makes sense. In the past, the none of it makes sense was this complete and utter frustration around how the team was going. It's like what are they doing here, right? Are they spinning their wheels, the stars, whatever. This is just a totally new thing. So if you can hear us kind of just sometimes wondering about what's even going on here, that's kind of the story. We're going to get into more Watford. Apologies to Trendon Watford waiting for this long into this episode to talk about him and his impact. We'll get to that here in just one moment. Before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, when the game tips off, NBA action is just getting started. No better place to get in on that than FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, even if you missed the opening tip. No big deal. You bet on the fourth quarter comeback. You could have bet on the Nets as plus 11.5 underdogs yesterday. I think they've dipped a little bit. I think they're 6th overall and against the spread this season. We'll take it. We love using FanDuel's live betting feature. Keeps every moment of the game exciting. Maybe you're just rooting for them at the end during that fourth quarter non-comeback, or maybe you just got there with the Nic Claxton buzzer beater. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. If your first $5 bet wins, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, so as we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the Nets 105-103 victory. By the way, stick around on Tuesday, where we're going to be talking about the Brooklyn Nets' path to the play-in and what that means for them and what that could be for the season and all those great things, because it's a narrative that now needs to be discussed. But inside of this game, inside of this win, I mentioned there, Trendon Watford, 24 minutes, 7 of 13 from the field, gives you 6 assists as well and 16 points. And since coming back from injury, and it was a long road, and we were even though some of these are the other things that fall under the radar, right? Injuries. We talked a little bit about Cam Thomas. When is he going to get back? You don't worry about it as much when the team is supposed to be losing a ton of games. Now, though, on this winning streak, Trendon Watford has 5 straight games in double digits. And the thing I liked about this, and I wonder if you would agree here, Trendon Watford he had 5 3-point attempts back against Charlotte. He's only taken 3 3-point attempts since then across 4 games. Like, his mold of game has shifted to probably what's needed for this team. And I assume there's a direct 1-to-1 from Jordi Fernandez and saying, like, you're going to need to play a certain style if we're going to be successful on a night in, night out basis.
I mean, the style was they literally ran like basically the same play, like for the entire fourth quarter, every time he was in the game, which was high pick and roll.
Yep.
He gets into the lane, Euro step, plant, another step, either shoot the ball like a little floater or lose the ball, which happened a few times. And then that was the whole offense. That was literally the whole offense for the entire fourth quarter. They just ran the same thing over and over again. I mean, I'm a little hyperbole, but not that much. Like, they basically ran him top of key, get the ball into his hand, and try to get him into the paint to either he was trying to get the defender on his hip. If he got the defender on his hip, he was going up with the floater. If the guy dropped or tagged him, like, he would stop and he would just try to pivot and try to sort of like slow-mo his way. He's like Kyle Anderson vibe, like slow-mo his way around to try to get a shot. That was the whole offense for the fourth quarter. Now, when that's your whole offense, you're going to score 20 points. This is what the Nets did, right? Like, they're going to score 20 points. And there was a stretch in this game where it looked horrible. I mean, so bad. It was unbelievably bad. I think there was like a 4-possession thing where they didn't even get a shot off. They just couldn't get the ball anywhere. They just couldn't do anything. But there's also these stretches. Watford, like at the 6th, Watford checks in at 7-18. Watford, 2-pointer. Then he gets an and 1. Then he makes a floater. Then he gets a turnover. Then he makes a driving layup. Then he checks out. Then he comes back in and makes a 2-pointer in the lane. Then he gets an assist because it was like one of the rare times that they kicked the ball out to Keon Johnson. Had another turnover. Like, that's all they did. That's all they did.
Yeah.
But Watford's like the only guy on the team that can do it.
I was going to say, right, because he's the only guy who can put the ball in the hands and say, go execute this sequence.
I mean, they're running Trendon Watford, Day'Ron Sharpe pick and rolls in the second quarter, like their life depended on it, because again, they don't have any other way to generate offense. So it's like you almost live with the parts where it looks like it's ground down to a halt or you're in quicksand and he's losing the ball, because he's also getting these floaters. He's also able to get a shot in the lane. Like, they literally don't have any other guy that can do that. Like, they don't have any other player, especially with no D'Lo, no Cam Thomas. Like, no guys in this team can generate their own shot, really. And so I understand why they essentially were just like, same play, run it again, and we'll live with the results. And the results ended up being there. So Watford's one of these guys. It takes you a while probably to watch him and sort of understand like sort of like what he brings to the team. And by the way, this wouldn't work for every team. Like, if you put him on a lot of other teams, it just kind of wouldn't work. Like, he wouldn't be able to do enough of this, and then the other stuff wouldn't be good enough. But for this team,
you have to be a certain roster model, like the Nets, deficient maybe of some talent, to open up the next phase of Trendon Watford's game, because otherwise you want him to be knocking down triples. But we've seen this last season, right? You want him to be knocking down triples, maybe attacking the basket when the opportunities come, but it's only because the volume of possessions the ball is going into his hand here, which you would never even consider doing on a top tier team,
If you have teams where they have like top end wing creators, like his services probably just aren't going to match, right? Like, but or a team that just doesn't have that, then they really just desperately. Exactly, he's the backup point guard. He might start next game, honestly. Like, just the way things are going. Like, if D'Lo can't play the next game because of the ankle, like, he just frankly could. I wouldn't be shocked if they started him, because this is just where they are. So really, really impressive. They've needed every bit from him. I'm pretty sure the minutes with him have been super sick. And I'm almost positive the record with him playing this year is really good. I should have had these like chambered, but I'm almost positive like the record when he plays is like well above 500. I'll get that while you say something. But overall, it's just been super, super impressive from him. And it's exactly what the team does not have anywhere else. And it just shows, the record is crazy when he plays. I'll count this up real fast.
With Trendon Watford playing. I don't know what the win total is here. You can scratch that up.
Go ahead. Say something and I'll get this number.
And the other part of it too, when you look at the box score as well, which I think it's off of Trendon Watford here certainly, but when I look in the starting lineup and you go down the list here and you see, you said 6 assists from Trendon Watford coming off the bench. You also had 6 from Killian Hayes. We'll talk about his game, 27 minutes. It's kind of funny how it's like a 1-to-1 in terms of non-shooting, but facilitating at times, kind of Ben Simmons vibe. Not the same player, not the same game. We get all that. But 4 assists for Keon Johnson, 3 for Nic Claxton, 4 for Cameron Johnson, a couple for Zaire Williams. It's spreading out the facilitation of this game when you don't have a pure point guard. Now, they get it into Trendon Watford's hands for all these key sequences we talk about late, but there has been at least that nice balance. And in that regard, like, I'm impressed that that players are able to pick up assists in a system with the current roster as they're constructed, because there's no there's a part of me that looks over at Philadelphia in this game. It's like, boy, if you just stay at home on your assignments, you probably win this game going away. And that's a part of just like the confusion of the eye test when you see the Nets take the court and you go, this should be a win for the other team, because that's what it looks like. And yet they find ways to facilitate. What's Watford's wins on that run?
They're 12-8 with him playing. They're 12-8. Now, these are always like a little funky, and I actually really don't usually love just doing wins and losses because it's just too many other factors that just go into like how you sort of win games and how you lose them, especially from a guy who's essentially coming off the bench. So I don't think he's like directly responsible for 12 wins, but they are positive with their -7.5 with him off the court this year, and their plus point, they're just scraping over the positives over net rating. But by the way, when your team is 14 games under 500 or whatever they are, that's impressive, right? So when you're 14 games under 500 and you have a positive net rating, like that is meaningful because your team has been outscored by a lot this season. And so he's just,
and again, about like with Day'Ron Sharpe, right? Like when they're winning his minutes and when he's had an impact, it's like, I'm not going to tell you that he's the reason why they win or lose a given game, but you think about it in a bigger way because the record is where it is, because the plus minus is where it is. It tracks bigger. It tracks more importantly.
And we said this before he even came back. We were like, look, they need a skill set. Like they just need guys who can dribble. They don't have guys who can dribble on the team. And when the fourth quarter, when the other team kind of figures this out, it's a total mess. When you don't have when you don't have essentially guards on your team, you see this is what happens in the fourth quarter, where they just go possession after possession after possession, where they just essentially just run themselves into a brick wall, and the other team makes a furious comeback, and you think they're going to lose. And so Watford has just enough to be able to do it, to run. Because the other thing too is especially when these late games, I know we're gonna get out of here, but these late game situations when you're trying to get out of the shot clock, he's like the only guy that you can kind of put the ball in his hands at the end of the shot clock and kind of hope something happens, right? Because he can get into the lane. He can maybe he thought he got fouled a lot, and he probably did, honestly. Like I think he got fouled.
Probably the old reputation, does not precede you, and they're like,
it did not. And he's really not a complainer, and he was getting and it makes sense. Like you're down there in the lane, you're a big guy. You probably are getting fouled a decent amount. But he's the only guy like end of shot clock grenade kind of stuff where it's like, hey, 5 seconds to go, you can give him the ball and say, if you can get the defender at least on your hip, maybe something can happen here, right? And they just don't have other guys who can do that. And so I'm just not surprised from that level that it's been this good for him.
I want to close out on a fun stat here for one Cameron Johnson, who in this game led the team in shots with 17, with 7 of 17 from the field, 1 of 9 from beyond the arc, just 11%. So he contributed greatly to the low 3-point shooting percentage in this game, but still finished out with 3 steals, 23 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds. Doug, going back to yours truly, my birthday, November 27th. How many
buddy,
games?
I got to tell you so right now. You couldn't even have told me. I wouldn't.
Oh, no, God. We've done this time and time again.
1 in 12 shot at guessing what month your birthday was in, right? It was just, what is that? 8.5%? Like 1 in 12 shot, it would have been to just even guess what month your birthday was in. Keep going. I know that wasn't the point.
Which is insulting, because I know that your birthday is in the middle of April somewhere, and that's exactly where we know the place is.
Birthdays are so stupid. Keep going.
Quick, sorry. I got this. Let's break down the podcast for a second here. Is your birthday actually in April at all?
No.
Okay, good. That's what I thought. Here we go. Now, Cameron Johnson, going back to November 27th, how many games has he scored less than double digits?
How many games is it?
It's a bunch. It's all the way back to November. So you're talking about, I don't know, let's just say it's about 30 games at least.
How many games you scored in less than double digits? 1.
You are correct, sir. November 13th, he scored 9 points. Sorry, I went too far back on that. I apologize. I was scrolling too far. He scored 5 points on November 25th. Starting on November 27th, he was in double digits all the way through December 29th, 9-point performance, and he has been a double-digit scorer ever since then for the Brooklyn Nets, all through February, all through January, all through February. And I just 8 of 8 at the line in this game, even though I butchered the delivery of these stats. I think it matters that when you keep a player like this around through the trade deadline for all the reasons we talk about and everything else, this is a part of when you're not a good offensive team, you probably need to circle, double, underline, and asterisk the fact that there's a player on your roster who every single night will give you double-digit performances, who every single night will give you an opportunity, especially from beyond the arc, in spite of a bad shooting performance in this past one. We know what he's done all season. He will give you easy points over the course of this game. So when Trendon Watford has an excellent night, when Trendon Watford does attack down the lane and facilitate, you actually can get across the line on some of these wins. So I think we'll probably talk about Cam Johnson, I think, as we go forward, as maybe one of the unsung kind of veterans when all these games are fun and you're still involved in them. He's just the guy that's going to get you some points throughout the game and give you a chance to have other guys step up in surprising ways to win them for you.
He's been great. He's been top 50 player in the NBA this year. Point stop. That's how good he's been. It's even better when you consider what the rest of the team looks like around them for his skill set, for the kind of shots that he's able to get. He's been awesome. So I don't think he's singularly the reason why they are out of the tank, which I think we're going to talk about next episode. I think there's conflicting things here, or not conflicting. There's things that are kind of all kind of bubbling up to the surface, but overall he's been great. Okay, next time we're going to talk a little bit about what it means as the Nets are flirting with the play-in right now, which I can't even believe we're here on February 23rd.
They're not dating yet, but boy, they've been sending eyes across.
That's gonna happen. I can't believe it's gonna happen. We got a bunch of thoughts about what's going on here. We'll talk. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to podcasts.
A ship is always safe at the shore, but that is not what it was built for, and that is one Al Einstein.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. R.I.P. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, 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 yeah.